Lamacia is dead, they said. Players just aren't ready for the first team, they said. Not only has this season reversed those narratives, but Francisco Garcia Pimienta hit almost every objective from the 2020-21 season. He lost players to injury and first-team promotion, and still came within penalty kicks of the promotion final, the same match that he reached last season. The difference? This season, he did it with one of the youngest Barça B squads in history, regularly starting players from the U19s, including a few 16-year-olds. Barcelona B were so deep this year that I didn't need to talk about Óscar Mingueza or Moriba. They should be discussed with the first team, even though Mingueza started and ended the season with Barça B and Ilaix played quite a few matches in the first half of the season. Even with those call-ups, most of you who are watching this video were still calling for other Barça B talents to get a look with the first team. And so I think a good place to start is with Garcia Pimienta's best player. Best player and captain Álex Collado turned 22 this year and had the best season of his career in terms of production. 8 goals and 3 assists, but he was much better than just his stats. Collado was the best player in the 3rd division over the course of the season while dealing with an early injury and teammates changing around him from game to game. He played largely on the right wing in a free role that allowed him to pop into spaces between the lines, and he also had a knack for free kick magic this year. The only knock on his season was the loss in the promotion playoffs when the attacker failed to make his usual impact. And on that subject, it was interesting to note that the deeper he got on the field, playing more in a traditional interior role later in the season, the more he struggled. Next year, Collado should be playing first team, top division football somewhere, whether at the Camp Nou or elsewhere. The only question he'll need to answer, or at least have answered for him, is where he will play and how he can fit alongside Messi, assuming the Argentine is staying. Either way, preseason would be the time for those answers. Another player that should be in first team preseason is Nico González. The 19-year-old has had his stock rise more than any other player in Barça B, going from a recently promoted Juvenil A interior midfielder, figuring out how to use a body that had just filled out, and turning into a promising pivot that is being whispered as a potential backup to Oriol Busquets in the near future. While also filling in at right back once this season, González made the switch to defensive midfield in February after an injury to Alejandro Balde. From that point on, it was his position. There was still learning to do for the Galician-born youngster, but the way he now uses his strong frame, coupled with his ability to read the action and play the right ball, has me thinking that a spot in the first team isn't too far away. While Nico seized his opportunity, it is unfortunate that it came at the expense of Alejandro Balde. The 20-year-old and one of Barça B's 4 captains held down the position for the first 12 matches of the season before an ankle injury derailed the rest of his year. When he did return in April for the final stretch, he was played slightly in front of Nico alongside Matheus Pereira. This did help solidify the midfield shape, but it put more responsibility on the attack to create on their own. Of the duo who played as the pivot this season, Alejandro is better at playing a long ball and delivering a set piece, while Nico seems to read the game better and rarely misses a tackle, as he collects the ball and immediately makes the right choice in possession. I wouldn't be surprised to see Alejandro do preseason with the first team and remain a Barça B captain next year. For Collado, it's first team football somewhere. For González and Oriana, it's either Barça's first team or sticking with the B team. But for Conrad de la Fuente, I can honestly say I have no idea where the American winger will be playing next season. He still has a contract until 2022 with a club option for 2 years. But the 19-year-old may need to explore all options for his future. He's been honest that as great as it was to play those 17 Champions League minutes against Dinamo Kiev and Ferencváros, and the 19 minutes in the Copa del Rey against Cornellà, missing a portion of his season to sit on the first team bench 21 times this year might have hurt his development more than helped it. While all that sitting only led to missing 5 Barça B matches, it was clear that he never found a good rhythm while jumping between the two. Conrad had just 1 goal heading into March before scoring 5 in the remaining 2 months. He also collected all 4 assists of the season from February 21st on. My fear would be that a loan could mean loan to buy, and I do worry about having him leave to try to settle in somewhere else. My ideal situation next season for the player would be preseason with the first team, another year with Barça B, but promotions to the first team only when he's guaranteed to play, as he did in the Champions League and Copa del Rey. See how this year goes, and then it's either automatic promotion to the first team, or unfortunately, a serious look elsewhere the following year. Not counting goalkeepers, those 4 are most likely to be featuring with the first team next season. We'll get to the other possibilities shortly, but before that, I want to recognize 2 players that were essential to how well Barça B did this season, but will likely never feature for the first team. At 24 years old, Raymond should be one of the better players for the B team. The Albanian was brought in last year to be a calming presence up top, and though he did struggle last season, this year he banged in 14 goals and provided 2 assists, easily the best season of his career. I'm not sure if the third division of Spanish football is where he wants to be in the long run, but he did prove that he'll be tough to replace if he leaves. At 23, Matheus Pereira isn't an old player, but he was one of the more experienced professionals on the B team. Last season was a rough one for him after he arrived from Juventus in January, but this season was a bit of a bounce-back year for the Brazilian midfielder. 25 appearances, 2 goals, 4 assists, while being deployed in a few different positions was a nice return for him. Barca's first team isn't in his future, but I do wonder how long he'll stick around the third division. I've mentioned a lot of players that may not be with Barça B next season, so maybe I should talk about one who should be a guaranteed starter. Gerard Peque Fernandez only turned 18 this year, but for the second straight season dipped his toes deeper into the water with Garcia Pimienta's squad. By the second phase of the season, he was starting every match on the left wing alongside Minaj and Conrad. A return of 3 goals and 1 assist in 20 matches doesn't seem like a lot, but for him, this season was much more about looking comfortable and up to the level, which I think he did by the end of the season. Next year will be a big one for him. Making that jump from promising Barça B teenager to a regular contributor is a tough task, but one that Peque is primed to handle. The center-back pairing of 21-year-old Arnau Comas and 19-year-old Santi Ramos Mingo should be a strength of Barça B next season. And don't be surprised if one or both get thrown in if the first team again has too many injuries. Comas was better in the fall, and that was surprising to me. I figured his loan move the previous season was his first step out of the club, but he was definitely the adult in the room along that back line all season long. He missed just 1 game to yellow card suspension, playing a team-high 26 matches. There are certainly things for him to work on, but his improvement from last year to this year is a good sign of a player still on the rise. It'll be interesting to see how he works with Ramos Mingo, who lost the middle part of his season to a hamstring injury. The Argentine has had both paperwork and injury issues since arriving last season, and hopefully next year is the year he gets to show what he's capable of and play more than 16 matches. Of the two, he's more likely to someday make the first team, but at the moment I think he has more to improve to get there. And how has he gone so long without mentioning Alejandro Balde, you're probably asking? Good question, and very much like his situation, waiting isn't a bad thing. The 17-year-old started the year with a knock and picked up a shoulder injury in March, but he still made 16 appearances with Barça B this season. What he contributes going forward is reminiscent of Serginho Dest on the other side, and just like the American, his defensive positioning can use some work. He still needs to figure out how to use his body to separate the attacker from the ball, and set-piece positioning could use some refinement too. Offensively though, his crossing has a ton of promise, and those who are watching this probably already know his 1v1 dribbling and ability to combine up the field with midfielders is what'll get him into the first team. You never want to anoint players too soon, but Balde has all the tools to be a first teamer by the 2022-23 season. We may see him a few times this coming year, since his attacking prowess is just about ready, but don't be surprised if the majority of his time is spent as a starter for Garcia Pimienta. What I will say is that if Koeman continues with the 3-5-2, there's probably a better chance we see Balde more than once or twice this campaign. Since Óscar Mingueza shut me up last year, I do also want to mention Nico Marmol, the 19-year-old who played 14 times at left back and 11 times at center back for Barça B last season. He also snagged 2 goals and an assist as a danger on set pieces. There isn't much talk about him as a first teamer, but Mingueza has taught me not to take players who show up and have versatility for granted. Defensive midfielder turned right back Alvaro Sanz also showed his versatility by changing positions and making that snake-bitten right back spot his own. The 20-year-old wasn't high enough on the defensive midfield depth chart, so he became Garcia Pimienta's regular right back for 15 matches before a foot injury ended his season near the end of March. Both Marmol and Sanz will be with Barça B next season, and I can almost guarantee that they'll be 2 of his most important players depending on Sanz's recovery. Last but not least, let's do goalkeepers. I thought Garcia Pimienta rotated his 3 keepers expertly this season, giving 13 appearances to Iñaki Peña, 9 to Arnau Tenas, and 5 to Lazar Karavic. And I think that's about what they each deserve without derailing anybody's development. After his showing in the promotion playoffs, I think Kool-Aids were reminded that the 20-year-old Peña will either be heading out this summer or he'll become the first team backup if Neto has moved on. That means that the 20-year-old Tenas will be the regular goalkeeper for Barça B, and 20-year-old Karavic will either move on or stay as Tenas's backup. Between dealing with injuries, promotion of some of his starters, and the need to help players improve, Barça B's most important figure last season was certainly Garcia Pimienta himself. He's been so influential the last 2 years that no matter what I say about him, I know we'll get stuck in that hamster wheel of people saying he needs to take Koeman's job or that he's too good for the third division. All I know is that I don't want anybody else managing Barça B as long as Garcia Pimienta wants that job. And some of you may have noticed that I didn't talk about some of the other Juvenil A players that feature for Barça B, like Gabi or Ángel Alarcón. But never fear, this was just the Barça B regulars. I'll be discussing the best of the rest of Lamacia in the near future, so keep an eye out for that. And until next time, Forza Barça.